All right, guys, today is a very important day. Today we're going to be talking about Random Dungeon Finder, the tool used to find groups very quickly. You could queue into it like a battleground, the tool that's not in Wrath of the Lich King Classic, but was in Wrath of the Lich King. And today I want to make the case for a modified version of the tool. I've put out polls, I've seen tons of comments, and it really sounds like this might actually be the answer. It's not black and white, whether the tool should just be in or should not be in, because that splits the community quite a bit. However, I think a modified version of the tool is something we can all agree on. Now, guys, if you look at some of the comments of the surveys that I put out on YouTube, people typically say things like, yes, I want the tool, but I just want it while I'm leveling. Now, this is a very important point because that's actually what I also want. I think it's a great tool for when you have those quests to go to a dungeon. And honestly, I wish we could get some insight on the statistics about who completes those quests, how many people are running low-level dungeons, because I bet it's near zero. Without Random Dungeon Finder, there are so many instances that never get, no players ever go into. Like, who is running Dead Mines right now on Wrath Classic? I bet you nobody. Let's go /who Dead Mines and let's see how many people are in it. Or let's /who Wailing Caverns. I bet nobody's in there. Or Ragefire Chasm, for example. These low-level dungeons don't ever see use, or very, very little use, because there is no easy way to put a group together. Now, if there was a cross-realm dungeon finder tool, these instances, I guarantee, would see much more use than they currently are seeing right now. Now, I want to tackle the argument that it destroys immersion. I came up with this idea. I've never seen this idea before. I don't know if it's a good idea. I'd like to hear what you think. In order to queue for the dungeon in a cross-realm dungeon finder, you'd have to go and right-click on the summoning stone, which would then open up the Dungeon Finder menu. That way it doesn't ruin your immersion. You're basically queuing up at the summoning stone. So that's the idea. I figure, it's not breaking immersion because you're literally at the dungeon already. It's not teleporting you there, plucking you out like that assembly belt crane, cartoon. Like, you're actually going to the dungeon and you're just looking for other people. Downside is, what if there's no one else in the queue for that dungeon? You just traveled all that way. I realize that's a downside, but I guess there has to be some, compromises there. So that's one idea. But here is the key thing that I see people don't like about Dungeon Finder. It's that they don't want it to be used at max level. And I completely agree with this, because at max level, I have no problem using Blizzard's tool for finding heroics or heroic plus. And by the way, I've been pugging some heroic pluses, and I have to be honest, it's not a difficult dungeon in my opinion, but when you pug it, I guess it is for some people. And I could definitely see a random Dungeon Finder for heroic plus being a nightmare that should not exist, because those groups I don't think are going to be able to do heroic plus. And honestly, maybe some heroics can't be done either. So I definitely think a random dungeon finder for normal dungeons, so non-heroics, levels 1 through 80, any normal dungeon, I think random dungeon finder, or I should say dungeon finder, should exist. Now, another big bonus of dungeon finder is the bonus loot. Now, I would be okay sacrificing the bonus loot. However, I do think the bonus XP was always fun to get. The bonus loot's amazing. I don't know if people are against the bonus loot, but honestly, I think the tool itself, the ability to quickly find groups, is what is super valuable to me. And I think actually, yes, the Satchel of Spoils of helpful supplies or whatever, I think that actually should be removed, because that bag has items that are just way more powerful than anything you're ever going to find while leveling whatever your current level is. It's always going to be your best in slot, which incentivizes just grinding the tool, right? And you're not really doing anything else. The tool became a little bit too powerful because of those satchels of spoils, and because the XP boost of the Dungeon Finder perhaps is too strong that it becomes the fastest way to level. In my mind, the best possible way to design the Dungeon Finder tool is to not break immersion, to only do normal dungeons and for leveling, and to make it something that you kind of only run maybe once or twice because maybe you love that dungeon so much, but something that doesn't become the fastest way to level, so that you're still going out in the open world, and the open world is healthy, right? Because I think that is one thing that is a criticism of the Dungeon Finder tool, is that players are just going to sit literally next to their trainer in a major city and just queue nonstop while learning their new spells and abilities as they are leveling up. And the new gear that they're getting from the Satchel of Spoils is their best in slot for their level. And so they're just replacing their gear from the dungeons, and they literally never leave the city 1 through 60. So my potential solution there is it just make it not the fastest way to level. You could also make it so you can only queue a certain number of times, or like I said, you have to go to the actual dungeon, go to that particular summoning stone, right click it in order to queue up, and that way it doesn't ruin immersion. It doesn't have people just sitting in the major city. Now guys, I'm going to include a poll in the description and probably the top comment pinned. I want to see what you guys think about this. Would you want a modified dungeon finder? Is there a criticism I haven't addressed in this video that you believe that is why dungeon finder shouldn't exist? I think it would revitalize the game. I would think it would cause a lot more players to, number one, play if they haven't been playing. Number two, it would cause players who maybe aren't going to level alts because they hate leveling to actually go ahead and level those alts. We could revitalize the old world zones, especially if you actually have to go to the summoning stones. I think those summoning stones would be quite popular. You'd see a lot of people outside the dungeon. It could be like a social experience, perhaps, just seeing everyone queue up. I think there's a lot of benefits to using something like that. I think the satchel of spoils should be removed. And I think that the XP bonus should be nerfed a bit. I kind of like how they made it just the first random heroic or the first random dungeon you do a day gives you those bonuses, and then no additional ones will give you a bonus. Perhaps they could do something similar, like the first, because you want to incentivize people to use the tool, right? So the first dungeon finder time you use the tool gives you a big XP boost. Maybe it does give you just that one satchel, and then after that, no more satchels of spoils, no more huge XP boost, and so that way it's just a regular dungeon run and not as big of an incentive to go run that dungeon. So these are my proposed changes. Let me know what you guys think in the comments below, and let's see if we can have a constructive discussion about how a modified dungeon finder tool could potentially work in Wrath of the Lich King Classic.